I have quite the chess battle to show you on this episode of Road to Rapid Top 1000. I got myself with the black pieces coming up against a slightly lower rated German opponent who opens with e4, and I go for d6. He plays d4, I go knight f6, he develops his knight, and now I play knight b to d7, initiating the lion defense, which is an opening that I've been experimenting with lately. And my opponent here decided to go for the aggressive bayonet attack with g4. Now, this definitely caught me by surprise, but got to play on, and I decided to counter him in the center with e5. Now, he could have immediately advanced his pawn to attack my knight, but then I could maybe take him, and things would get messy very quickly. So instead, he decided to develop his bishop, and I took his pawn in the center. He recaptured, and now I went in with the queen. Probably not the best move, but I was looking to attack him in the center here. And if I can get this pawn, all his pieces will start falling. So he, of course, defended it with queen e2. And now I jumped in with my other knight, opening up the bishop. Now suddenly this pawn, his so-called bayonet, is hit 3 times. So he has to defend it with h3. And now I realize that if I give him any time, he will launch another pawn forward and completely overrun me on the king side. For example, if I were to make a slow move, f4, now this knight's hit, it's going to have to go back. Then he'll just move his queen up to defend this guy, and then next move he'll kick my other knight back. I cannot allow this to happen. So I played g5, guarding the square, making sure he doesn't attack me with a pawn, and now he castled long. And so I played c6, just making sure this knight doesn't have any aggressive jumps. And here he played f3, which I immediately questioned because this does not look like a good move. The square was ripe for the knight, but now the knight's blocked, his bishop is blocked, both these pieces are screaming for air, they can't get out. So I decided to attack him while he's least expecting it with h5. Now if he's not careful, I'm threatening to take here and then use this rook file to win a pawn. So he played bishop to g2, and this is where I really stopped and thought for like almost 5 minutes. I wasn't sure on how to proceed because there's a lot of different things I could do here. First, I could develop the bishop, but I didn't like this because then he could take here, and then his rook gets really active. Could be danger. So instead, I just played b5, looking to start a queenside storm. And even though my king is in the center, the position is closed, so it's hard for him to break through. And he played now another move that caught me off guard, h4. Now, if we go back a move, I actually could have stopped this if I had played h4 myself. And now we see that I could have completely just closed down the side of the board. But I wasn't expecting him to hit like this, and it kind of caught me off guard for a second, but then I realized I can just take. But then he took. And now we see that my knight's under attack, and then his pawn is under attack, the rooks are attacking each other, complete chaos on the king side. So I simply took his rook, and here he immediately recaptured my rook without really thinking things through. A better move he could have played was take the knight, and then I would take his pawn and attack his queen, and now we have a situation where both queens are hit at once, and this would have been a really crazy exchange. Just one variation is bishop takes f3, and then I take here, and then if he takes, I can actually go here and then attack his queen, and I'm going to win his rook. Things did not go this way, but this would have been just one way the battle could have went. So now he captured an h1, and my knight's hit, so it has to sidestep, and it goes to h5. And now it's threatening to infiltrate all kinds of squares on the king side, so he retreats with the bishop, but now here comes the second knight, and we see that both my knights, both my lions, so to speak, are getting really active, and it's going to be a problem for him. He decided to take this pawn, because why not? It's a free pawn, right? Nope. Here comes my other knight. Now it's a fork between the bishop and the queen. Not to mention that this guy's hit, and he's in a lot of trouble now. He played queen to f3, and I took his bishop. And now the problem for him is, if he takes it right away with the queen, I grab this bishop, and I'm up a clean piece. I come out on top in that battle. Instead, after I took his first bishop, he moved his second, and now my knight can't quite escape because it's trapped in the corner. Although what I could have done, a tactic that I missed, was bishop takes g4, attacking the queen, and if he were to take the knight, I would take his rook. And if you were to take my bishop, then another knight fork, now hitting the queen and hitting the rook. I didn't see this, however, because I was already plotting a direct attack against his king. It may look safe for now, but not long with my bishop getting involved. Now it's on a very dangerous diagonal. So he just recaptured his knight, not expecting anything. And this is where things really started to get wild. I took his pawn first, attacking the rook. So rook moved up. Now the move that I was planning all along. Bang, knight takes b2. Giving up my knight for just a pawn. And obviously his king can take. So it did. But now as we see, the king is in the open. But you're probably asking, okay, what now? What was this crazy plan that you had in mind? How could you possibly follow this up? Well, the first thing I can tell you is I was actually planning to play queen to b4, but then I realized that my pawn's in the way, so that's not going to be possible. But fortunately, I have this move, pawn to b4, and we see now that because of my bishop, this knight is pinned, and it can't run away from the pawn. It's going to get taken. So he tried to fight back by blocking my bishop with this pawn advance, but I get to take the knight with check. And so I did, and here he made a fatal mistake. What he should have done was simply take the pawn with the rook, but he thought that he would be safer if his king just slowly retreated back to c1. He was thinking he was safe here because he's got a rook, he's got a couple pawns. What could I possibly do to get his king now? Believe it or not, my next move was the last of this game. And I simply played pawn to d5. Now this move has two purposes. First of all, his queen is threatening to take here and to attack my king and also pick up the rook. So I had to block that. But at the same time, this opens up my queen, and now I have a direct path to get at his king. Now my opponent had about 8 minutes on his clock at the time that I played this move, but he was not able to come up with a solution and probably just sulked away from the board, realizing that his bayonet attack had failed miserably against the lion. Really, he has no good moves here. Only thing he could try is rook to take c3, but then I could just bring my rook in or even just pick up this pawn. And if we were to trade, we see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns against his 3, plus his rook's under attack. I'm going to take this pawn. Everything is just falling for him. And that's the best case scenario. If instead he were to make a move like, let's say, get the queen involved, attack my bishop, it's a check, and it's actually a checkmate the next move because he can't go this way due to my bishop. He can't go this way due to my pawn, which he could have taken. But now after king to b1, queen to b2 would be checkmate. So essentially he has no good way to continue this game, which is why he basically resigned in this position, allowing me to cap off a nice 23-move win. The lion successfully fended off the bayonet attack, and I was able to get a pretty nice win here. Now, I actually haven't shown you the graph of my progress in the Road to Rapid quest in a while, so let me do that right now. Just shrink it down a little bit, and as you can see, my rating is now 1927, which is a little bit below the highest that it's been, and I haven't quite broken into the top 3,000 yet. But if we look closely, at the time that I started the series, there was less than 600,000 people playing Rapid games. And now that number has increased by over 40,000. So there's increasingly more and more competition. If you go back and watch the first video of my series, I said that I would only need a rating of about 2,080 to get into the top 1,000. Now it's more like 2,095 or even 2,100. So the standards have shifted, and now it's going to take even more work to get into the top 1,000, but I'm not backing down. I'm going to get there eventually.